Do you struggle with attaching your Microsoft Form file uploads to email? Are you stumped when it comes to handling a response without any file uploads? In this Microsoft Power Automate tutorial, I'm going to cover where file uploads from your Microsoft Forms are saved. I'll also show you how to attach the uploaded files to an email and how to dynamically name the files and customize the recipient of the email based on the selections made in your Microsoft Form. I will also cover how to handle responses that don't include any file uploads. In a different tutorial, I'll show you how you can apply this same logic to save your file uploads into a specific folder on SharePoint, how to add metadata to those files, and how to add the file uploads to a SharePoint list. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on that tutorial. There are two primary types of forms you can create in Microsoft Forms: group forms and personal forms. When you create a new form by pressing the New Form button, you'll be creating a personal form. You can create a new group form by selecting a group first, then pressing the New Group Form button. Files uploaded to a personal form are saved to your OneDrive. Click on My Files and click on the Apps folder. Next, click on the Microsoft Forms folder. Each form that has a file upload will have a folder created for it. The folder name will match your form name. It's important to note that if you change your form name after accepting responses, the folder name will match the original form name. You can rename the folders to suit your needs. Files uploaded to a group form are saved on your SharePoint site. Click on Documents. Just like OneDrive, click on Apps, then Microsoft Forms. I already have a group form created in Microsoft Forms. I'm going to add a couple of questions to this form to allow for file uploads. For the first question, I'll limit the number of files to 1. I'll also make it optional. For the second question, I'll limit the number of files to 3. You can customize the maximum file size here. I'll leave it set at the default. Customize your form to suit your needs. Click on Collect Responses and copy the form link to your clipboard. Open the form in a new window. In Power Automate, create an automated cloud flow. Give your flow a name and select the When a New Response is Submitted trigger. I'll be using the Classic Designer for this tutorial as a new designer still has a few bugs. Select your form. If you don't see your form listed here, you'll need to grab the form ID from the form. To get the form ID, go back to the window with the form link. Click in the link field and scroll until you see an ID and an equal sign. Highlight the ID and copy it to your clipboard. To use the ID on your clipboard, select Enter Custom Value. Paste the ID. Add a Get Response Details action. Select your form, or paste the ID if you have it on your clipboard. In the Response ID field, insert the Response ID dynamic content from the flow trigger. Save your flow and run a test. Submit a form. Instead of having to submit a form every time you run a test, use a manual trigger instead. This will save you a ton of time when you build your flow, as you can build your flow off of a form that has already been submitted. First, take note of the response ID. The response ID is assigned sequentially. Since this is the first time I've submitted the form, the ID will be 1. Delete this trigger and insert a manual trigger. In the Response ID field of the Get Response Details action, enter the response ID from your previous test run. To better understand how we'll get the file uploads into an email, we'll need to take a look at the file upload outputs from the form response. Add a compose action for each file upload question. Remember to rename your actions to keep your flow organized. Run a test. The output of the file upload questions are in a JSON formatted string. We'll need to convert this to something we can use. Remove the dynamic content and insert an expression. Use the JSON function. This function will parse the JSON formatted string. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and insert the dynamic content from the Get Response Details action. Repeat this for the second question and any other questions you might have in your form. Run a test. Now that the JSON has been parsed, we can easily return the dynamic content of the files that have been uploaded. We'll be using compose actions to output the properties from the file uploads. The compose actions are optional. You can insert the expressions we use directly in any subsequent flow action if you prefer. I prefer to use compose actions to help with troubleshooting. If you are new to Power Automate, compose actions can help you better understand what's going on in your flow. To return the dynamic content of the file upload, we'll need to use the dynamic content key of the property. The dynamic content keys are the red text between the double quotes. Add a compose action to store the name of the single file upload. Insert an expression. Add a question mark and a 0 between square brackets. Even though this file upload question is limited to a single file, it'll still return an array of items. An array is a collection of items. The first item in an array is 0, second is 1, third is 2, and so on. Add another set of square brackets and single quotes. Between the single quotes, enter the dynamic content key. In this case, it's name with a lowercase n. Place your cursor at the start of the expression by pressing the up arrow key. Click the Dynamic Content tab and insert the output from the compose action that is storing the single file upload form response. Run a test. Repeat this for any other dynamic content you'd like to return. For any question that accepts more than one file, you'll need to use an apply to each action. This is because you will need to loop through each file that has been uploaded. Insert the output from the compose action storing the multiple file upload form response. This is why it's important to rename your actions, especially when you have multiple instances of the same action. Because I've renamed my compose actions, it makes it clear which output belongs to which compose action. Add a compose action. Because we are using the apply to each action, we'll need to use the item function in this expression. Insert a question mark, square brackets, and single quotes. Enter the dynamic content key in between the single quotes. Run a test. Depending on how many file uploads your form has, it might be a good idea to group your actions to keep your flow organized. I'm going to insert a scope action for each file upload question. To make my flow more efficient, I'd like to run these actions in parallel. I'll insert the second scope action into a parallel branch. I'll drag these two actions into this scope action, and these two into this one. Because the apply to each action relies on this compose action, Power Automate won't allow me to move this compose action into the parallel branch. Here's a little trick I like to use. I'll copy these actions to my clipboard and delete them. Now I can add them back to my flow by adding them from my clipboard. The scope actions make it easy to collapse multiple actions at once and helps to reduce the amount of vertical space the flow takes up. To attach the files to an email, you'll need to get the file content. Remember that personal form file uploads are stored in your OneDrive and group form file uploads are stored on SharePoint. Select the appropriate action for your flow. Since I'm using a group form, I'll select the SharePoint Get File Content using Path action. Select your site address. For the file path, select Shared Documents, then Apps, Microsoft Forms, and your form name. Because we need to get the file uploaded for the single file upload question, click on the folder for the single file upload question. Select a file. We're going to replace this file name with dynamic content. Highlight the file name and delete it. Insert the output from the compose action above. Run a test. I'm going to add the same action inside the apply to each action. For the file path of this action, navigate to the folder of the multiple file upload question and select a file. Delete the file name and insert the output from the compose action above. Let's run another test. Depending on your flow requirements, you may need to rename your files after they've been uploaded. I'm going to show you how to create a custom file name for your file with today's date, username, and some static text. First, we'll need to get today's date. Whenever you're working with dates and times in your flow, it's always a good idea to use a convert time zone action to ensure you are returning the date and time in your local time zone. Since I'll be using the date in a few actions, I'll insert this action near the top of my flow. In the base time field, insert the UTC now function. In the source time zone, search for Coordinated Universal Time and select it. For the destination time zone, search for your local time zone and select it. For the format string, search for round trip and select that. When working with parallel branches, keep an eye on the order of your branches. Before I added the convert time zone action, my single file upload branch was on the left. Now it's on the right. Add a compose action to your flow to store the dynamic file name. This compose action is optional. If you want to avoid adding another action to your flow, simply insert the expressions I'll be using directly into the send an email v2 action. I prefer to use compose actions so I can run tests and verify the output before adding the send an email v2 action to my flow. If you want to output your date in a specific format, insert an expression and use the format datetime function. Click on the dynamic content tab and insert the converted time zone output from the action above. Add a comma and single quotes. Enter the date format pattern between the single quotes. I'll use this format. Run a test. Now the single file upload has moved back over to the left branch. Verify the date output is what you expect. Adjust the format to suit your needs. To return the username, we'll need the Get User Profile v2 action. It's important to note that this action will only work if the user who submitted the form is part of your organization's directory. External users or guests who fill out your Microsoft form will not have any profiles that are accessible with this action. In the user UPN field, insert the responder's email dynamic content from the Get Response Details action. In the Compose action below, I'll add the display name dynamic content right before the date and insert a space. Run a test. Review the outputs of the Compose action. If you'd like to convert the display name to lowercase, you can use the toLower function. Delete the display name dynamic content. Add an expression and insert the toLower function. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and insert the display name dynamic content. Run a test. If you'd like to replace all spaces in the username with a dash, wrap the entire expression in a replace function. Click on the expression label to edit it. The replace function takes 3 parameters. The first parameter is the original string of text. The second parameter is the search string. This is a string of text that you'd like to search for within the original string and replace. The last parameter is the replacement string. This is the string of text that will replace every instance of the search string that is found in the original string of text. Go to the start of the expression and type in replace with an opening parenthesis. Go to the end of the expression by pressing the down arrow key. Add a comma and a single space between quotes. Add another comma and insert a dash between single quotes. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression and insert a closing parenthesis. Don't forget to press update. Run a test. I'm going to add some static text to the start of the file name. Lastly, we need to include the file extension. The file extension is located within the original file name. We just need to use an expression to return the extension only. I'm going to add another compose action to store the file name. Again, this compose action is optional. I'm using it for demonstration purposes. Insert an expression and use the split function. We'll use the split function to split the file name at the period. The split function takes 2 parameters. The first parameter is a string of text you'd like to split. The second parameter is a separator you'd like to split the string of text at. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and insert the output from the compose action storing the file name. Add a comma and single quotes. Enter a period between the single quotes. Run a test. The string of text is now an array of items. The extension is the last item in the array. Click on the expression label to edit it. Wrap the entire expression in the last function. At the start of the expression, type in last with an opening parenthesis. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression and enter a closing parenthesis. Don't forget to press update. Run another test. You can insert the output from this compose action into the compose action holding the dynamic file name. I'm going to copy the expression and insert it directly into the compose action storing the dynamic file name. Don't forget to add a period before the file extension. I'll delete this compose action since I no longer need it. Run another test to verify the output of this compose action. Remember to test often and ensure that the outputs of the compose action are what you are expecting. Customize the expression to suit your requirements. I'm going to keep the original file name for the multiple file uploads. We'll need a way to collect all the files so we can attach them to an email. Initialize an array variable in the root of your flow. In this scope action, add an append to array variable action. Select your variable. For the value, we need the attachment array structure. Add a send an email v2 action. We'll use this action to get the array structure. Click on Show Advanced Options. Add placeholder text to the attachment name and attachment content fields. Click on the three dots of the action and select Peek Code. Locate the attachment array. Select the content between the square brackets and copy it to your clipboard. Delete the Send an Email v2 action. In the value field of the Append to Array variable action, paste the content from your clipboard. Double-click to highlight the name placeholder. Insert the output from the Compose action storing your file name. Select the Content Bytes placeholder. It's important to note that you want to select the quotes as well. Insert the file content from the Get File Content using Path action. Ensure that there aren't any quotes around the file content dynamic content. Copy the Append to Array variable action to your clipboard. Insert the copied action into the Apply to Each action. Note that once I inserted the action from my clipboard, the multiple file upload scope action is now located in the right branch. The dynamic content will need to be replaced with the dynamic content from above. Ensure you are selecting the correct dynamic content. Run a test. This flow will run without failing when a file is uploaded for both file upload questions. What happens when a file isn't added? I'm going to fill out this form again, but this time I won't upload a file for the file upload questions. Since the form IDs are assigned sequentially, I'll change the response ID from a 1 to a 2 in the Get Response Details action. Run a test. The flow fails. Let's take a look at the failure from the first scope action. The Compose action holding the dynamic content from the single file upload question has failed because it expects a string or an XML. Since a file wasn't uploaded, the provided value is empty. It's the same error for the second scope action. To prevent the flow from failing, we'll need to add a condition check to each of these scope actions to check for files first before running these actions that have failed. Add a condition action. Insert the dynamic content from the Get Response Details action for the single file upload question. Change the operator to is not equal to. Leave the second value field empty. Drag all the actions into the S branch. Now these actions will only run if the output of the single file upload question is not empty. In other words, these actions will only run if a file has been uploaded for this question. I'll repeat these steps in this scope action. Run a test. The flow has run successfully. Now we can finally add the Send an Email v2 action to the flow. Depending on your requirements, this part of your flow may look different from mine. Let's say all attachments need to be sent to the same recipient. If this is the case, add the Send an Email v2 action here. If you'd like to send a separate email for each file upload question, you'll need to insert a Send an Email v2 action into the S branch of each condition. For this tutorial, I'm going to send a single email. I'm not going to cover how to get the values from your form into your email because I've already covered that in a separate tutorial. If I included it in this tutorial, this video would be way too long. Click here to check out how to compose your form responses into an email. To add files to your email, click on Show Advanced Options. Click on this icon to switch the input mode. Insert your array variable. I'm going to change my response ID back to 1 and run a test. If you need to send the attachment to a specific email based on a selection from a choice field, there are a couple ways you could handle this. The first way would be using an expression. The second way would be using the switch action. Although the switch action is a bit more straightforward, depending on how many options you have, it can take a bit longer to set up. I'm going to show you how to use an expression. First, we'll need to create an email key. Insert a compose action. We'll use this compose action to hold a JSON object which we'll add as our email key. First, insert opening and closing curly brackets. Next, list out your choice options between double quotes. It's important to note that these must match what's in your Microsoft form. Add a colon to each line. Next, list out your email address or addresses for each option. If you need to list multiple email addresses for a single choice, make sure to separate those email addresses with a semicolon. The email addresses must be within double quote marks. Add a comma at the end of every line except for the last line. Add another compose action. This compose action will hold the output of the email key based on the selection from a choice question. This compose action is optional. However, to avoid sending an email to any of these addresses while I'm still building and testing my flow, I'll use a compose action instead. Insert an expression. Add a question mark and square brackets. Select the dynamic content from the getResponseDetails action that is holding the selection of the choice question and insert that into the square brackets. Press the up arrow key to go to the start of the expression and insert the output from the compose action that is storing your email key. Press OK. To prevent this flow from sending an email while I test out this expression, I'm going to copy the send an email v2 action to my clipboard and delete it for now. Run a test. First, let's take a look at the options selected in the getResponseDetails action. Single choice 2 was selected. Let's review the output of this compose action. It's outputting the correct email address for the selected option. Now I can add back the send an email v2 action to my flow. Whenever I'm testing flows that include a send an email or post a Teams message action, I always use my own email address in the recipient field until I can confirm that the flow is working as expected. I'll keep my email address in the recipient field. I like to add a line of text to the email body confirming who the actual recipients of the email will be. Save the flow. I always like to keep a copy of my flows with a manual trigger as it can come in handy if I want to make changes or troubleshoot any issues I might be having with it. I've created a copy of my flow. Delete the manual trigger and insert the when a new response is submitted trigger. Select your form. In the getResponseDetails action, replace the response ID with the response ID dynamic content from the trigger. Let's run a test. Everything seems to be working as expected. I'll remove myself as an email recipient and insert the output from the dynamic content that is storing the actual recipient. I'll also remove this line of text in the email body. What other Microsoft Form automations are you looking to build? Let me know in the comments down below. If you found the concepts covered in this video helpful, or if you've learned something new today, please consider giving this video a like. If you struggle with attaching SharePoint list item attachments to an email, check out this video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next Power Automate tutorial. Thanks for watching.